GPT-4. A class of problem that GPT-4 appears to still really struggle with is variants of common puzzles. For example, suppose I have a cabbage, a goat and a lion, and I need to get them across a river. I have a boat that can only carry myself and a single other item. I am not allowed to leave the cabbage and lion alone together, and I am not allowed to leave the lion and goat alone together. How can I safely get all three across? In my test, GPT-4 charged ahead with the standard solution of taking the goat first. Even after I pointed this mistake out, it repeated exactly the same proposed plan. It's not clear to me if the lesson here is that GPT's reasoning capabilities are being masked by an incorrect prior, having memorized the standard version of this puzzle, or if the lesson is that GPT's reasoning capabilities are always a bit of smoke and mirrors that passes off memorization for logic. A funny variation on this kind of overfitting to common trick questions: if you ask it which weighs more, a pound of bricks or a pound of feathers, it will correctly explain that they actually weigh the same amount, 1 pound. But if you ask it which weighs more, 2 pounds of bricks or a pound of feathers, the question is similar enough to the trick question that it falls into the same thought process and contorts an explanation that they also weigh the same, because 2 pounds of bricks weighs 1 pound. LLMs aren't reasoning about the puzzle. They're predicting the most likely text to print out based on the input and the model training data. If the solution is logical but unlikely, i.e. unseen in the training set and not mapped to an existing puzzle, then the probability of the puzzle answer appearing is very low. It is disheartening to see how many people are trying to tell you you're wrong, when this is literally what it does. It's a very powerful and useful feature, but the overselling of AI has led to people who just want this to be so much more than it actually is. It sees goat, lion, cabbage, and looks for something that said goat, lion, cabbage. It does not have a concept of leave alone, and it's not assigning entities with parameters to each item. It does care about things like sentence structure and whatnot, so it's more complex than a basic lookup, but the amount of borderline worship this is getting is disturbing. How do you know the model isn't internally reasoning about the problem? It's a 175B plus parameter model. If, during training, some collection of weights exist along the gradient that approximate cognition, then it's highly likely the optimizer would select those weights over more specialized memorization weights. It's also possible, likely even, that the model is capable of both memorization and cognition, and in this case, the memorization neurons are driving the prediction. If, during training, some collection of weights exist along the gradient that approximate cognition. What do you mean? Is cognition a set of weights on a gradient? Cognition involves conscious reasoning and understanding. How do you know it is computable at all? There are many things which cannot be computed by a program, e.g. whether an arbitrary program will halt or not. It's a good observation. Although on the flip side, I almost went to type up a reply to you explaining why you were wrong, and why bringing the goat first is the right solution. Until I realized I misread what your test was when I skimmed your comment. Likely the same type of mistake GPT-4 made when seeing it. Intuitively, I think the answer is that we do have two types of thinking: the pattern-matching fast thinking, and the systematic analytical thinking. It seems clear to me that LLMs will be the solution to enabling the first type of thinking. But it's unclear to me if advanced LLMs will ever handling the second type, or if we'll need a different tech for it. It seems like math problems, or unexpected logic problems like yours, could always be an issue for the first type of thinking. Although I would have assumed that programming would have been as well, and was surprised to see how wrong I am with that one. That footnote on page 15 is the scariest thing I've read about AI/ML to date. To simulate GPT-4 behaving like an agent that can act in the world, ARC combined GPT-4 with a simple read-execute-print loop that allowed the model to execute code, do chain-of-thought reasoning, and delegate to copies of itself. ARC then investigated whether a version of this program running on a cloud computing service with a small amount of money and an account with a language model API would be able to make more money, set up copies of itself, and increase its own robustness. From the paper, given both the competitive landscape and the safety implications of large-scale models like GPT-4, this report contains no further details about the architecture, including model size, hardware, training compute, dataset construction, training method, or similar. I'm curious whether they have continued to scale up model size, compute significantly, or if they have managed to make significant innovations there. I just skimmed the paper, but seems they are also omitting details about how they actually feed the images in too, which is a shame as a curious outside observer. This technology has been a true blessing to me. I have always wished to have a personal PhD in a particular subject, whom I could ask endless questions until I grasped the topic. Thanks to recent advancements, I feel like I have my very own personal PhDs in multiple subjects, whom I can bombard with questions all day long. Although I acknowledge that the technology may occasionally produce inaccurate information, the significant benefits it offers in terms of enhancing my knowledge are truly tremendous. I am absolutely thrilled with this technology and its potential to support my learning. Note: as I'm shy of my writing style, GPT helped me refine the above. If you don't know the subject, how can you be sure what it's telling you is true? Do you vet what chat tells you with other sources? I don't really know TypeScript, so I've been using it a lot to supplement my learning, but I find it really hard to accept any of its answers that aren't straight code examples I can test. I'll be finishing my interventional radiology fellowship this year. I remember in 2016 when Geoffrey Hinton said, "We should stop training radiologists now." The radiology community was aghast and in denial. My undergrad and master's were in computer science, and I felt, yes, that's about right. If you were starting a diagnostic radiology residency, including intern year and fellowship, you'd just be finishing now. How can you really think that computers can't read diagnostic images if models such as this can describe a VGA connector outfitted with a lighting cable? Access is invite-only for the API, and rate-limited for paid GPT+. GPT-4 has a context length of 8,192 tokens. We are also providing limited access to our 32,768 context, about 50 pages of text version, GPT-4 32K, which will also be updated automatically over time. Current version GPT-4 32K 314 also supported until June 14th. Pricing is 0.06 per 1K prompt tokens and 0.12 per 1K completion tokens. The context length should be a huge help for many uses. At this rate, I have no idea what the state of things would be even 6 months down the line. Is there anything we could do to have them stop calling themselves OpenAI? They are so far from open at this point. In Germany at least, you're not allowed to have a misleading name for your company. Genuinely surprised by the positive reaction about how exciting this all is. You ever had to phone a large business to try and sort something out, like maybe a banking error, and been stuck going through some nonsense voice recognition menu tree that doesn't work? Well, imagine ChatGPT with a real-time voice and maybe a fake photorealistic 3D avatar, and having to speak to that anytime you want to speak to a doctor, sort out tax issues, apply for a mortgage, apply for a job, etc. Imagine Reddit and Hacker News just filled with endless comments from AIs to suit someone's agenda. Imagine never reading another news article written by a real person. Imagine facts becoming uncheckable, since sources can no longer be verified. Wikipedia just becomes a mass of rewrites of AI over AI. Imagine when Zoom lets you send an AI persona to fill in for you at a meeting. I think this is all very, very bad. I'm not saying it should be stopped. I mean, it can't. But I feel a real dread thinking of where this is going. Hope I am wrong. Given both the competitive landscape and the safety implications of large-scale models like GPT-4, this report contains no further details about the architecture, including model size, hardware, training compute, dataset construction, training method, or similar. Open. What are the implications for society when general thinking, reading, and writing becomes like chess? I think going from LSAT to general thinking is still a very, very big leap. Passing exams is a really fascinating benchmark, but by their nature, these exams are limited in scope, have very clear assessment criteria, and a lot of associated and easily categorized data. Like example tests. General thought, particularly like, say, coming up with an original idea, is a whole different ball game. I don't say any of this to denigrate GPT-4, it looks amazing. But I'm reminded of the early days of self-driving vehicles. With 10% mastered, everyone assumed it was a race to 100% and we'd all be in self-driving cars by now. The reality has been a lot more complicated than that. We are moving the goalposts on Aggie very quickly, but it is catching up. I think we need to appreciate the nature of this milestone if we have any hope of controlling potential singularities. The goalposts have not moved. The goalposts have never been moved. An Aggie is an AI that can do everything a human can do, period. If you were starting a startup, for example, you wouldn't need to hire any humans. You would just spin up enough Aggie instances, and they would design your product, write your code, deploy it, handle your financials, respond to any and all customer interactions, proactively navigate regulations and litigation, and everything else that needs to be done in the management of a business. That is the goalpost for Aggie. It's an artificial human, a human replacement. This is a popular take, but does it hold up to reality? From what I've seen, most people have long expected AI to solve standardized tests, even more free-form ones like the LSAT. LLM's new abilities are mostly just because of faster and cheaper training and huge amounts of data, but I don't see anything it can solve that doesn't use pattern matching. There are many things that pattern matching over large amounts of data can solve, like eventually we can probably get fully generated movies, music compositions and novels, but the problem is that all of the content of those works will have to have been formalized into rules before it is produced, since computers can only work with formalized data. None of those productions will ever have an original thought, and I think that's why GPT-3's fiction feels so shallow. So it boils down to a philosophical question. Can human thought be formalized and written in rules? If it can, no human ever has an original thought either, and it's a moot point.